The book I've discussed the most on this channel is one which I've wanted to review for several months now. This Criterion novel is a book well known for being part of the official canon, but an underknown book for genuinely being a good story. That is, The Rise of the Arch-Illager. In this video, I want to discuss what makes this a good story, regardless of the childish reception it may have, and I want to explain especially why, in all of its cliches, it actually subverts all expectations, while still managing to build them up again for the final punch. My name is Illager, and it's time for me to review a book that sits oddly close like to Milton or his like on the shelf regarding themes, tropes, and characterial motivations within literature. Without further ado, let's begin. The one thing I think I love to see in a book most might be something worth reading for the self. Obviously, every book is probably going to tell a person's story, but generally the books that are best are the books that show the reader's self in them, with some level of dramaticism added as well. When we read a book, especially for entertainment, we generally look for characters that are interesting, and a good way to be interesting is for the character to be somewhat of an elaboration on the reader, making certain weaknesses far stronger for effect, and likewise his personality and desires, which lead to his will to strive for the betterment that generally comes at the end of the story, also much bigger. But ultimately, it's still all you. And this is true for most media, not just books. I'm thinking of Spider-Man, the nerd that, even after getting his powers, remains a struggling child who doesn't know his way in the world as he's growing into it. And the superpowers act to make this more evident. Now he's got expectations coming from people who hope he'll be their savior as a hero, just as in school, where, like most of the teens or young adults who are reading his comics, he's got people expecting lots of stuff. And the climax of this is with Uncle Ben, obviously. It wraps around to the idea that he didn't ask for any of it, just like most people never asked for the hurdles of their lives, but they just have to roll with it, because with their lives come responsibilities. Obviously, he's just one example, but there are many others. Almost everyone is someone's favorite character who represents their arch plights and has similar, exaggerated virtues that represent aspects of their lives. And now, the part of the video where I ask you to leave if you don't want spoilers for the book, as well as for its game, Minecraft Dungeons. This is the sort of essay where you could read the book after and try to watch for what I'm mentioning specifically, but otherwise, click off now, please. With Archie, he represents a host of different desires, and what I feel makes him special is that he doesn't exactly have the will to steel himself into achieving those desires right off the bat. What drives most characters to achieving what they want by the end of their stories is their will or otherwise belief that their end goals are worth the pain it will take to succeed. For Archie, this book's main character, his first arc is to find will, because he's given up all hope for otherwise victorying and filling his wants previously. This instantly makes him a little different, because he doesn't even try to achieve his willingness to try in the beginning. Of course, it also doesn't just come out nowhence, which would be otherwise less satisfying as well. In the beginning of the book, Archie is left alongside Thord as the only survivor of a raiding party pit against the undead. Our exposition then gives us some basic knowledge about our main character, where admittedly we do meet some cliches. Archie's parents are dead and he's a weakling Illager. We then get some information that explains that the Illagers generally dislike weak creatures and prize strength above all else. Thord, then, is also Archie's bully, and has been such since both their childhoods. Normally I'd expect a story to either build, hence, into one of three tropes. Archie is going to either find love, thus fulfilling his desire, possibly by succeeding against Thord and becoming an exalted member of his society, or find himself, and learn that he doesn't need to be part of a society or change himself for others' sake. In The Rise of the Arch-Illager, we get a bit of both. Now, that's not unheard of, and in fact, a lot of books can overlap these end goals, but the way it works is interesting because Archie, well, he does achieve both of those things, and gains the benefits of them. By the end of the book, they've both somewhat undone each other, and he's left back at square one, emotionally. And this is where I want to discuss Archie's emotional state. In Great Expectations, a book I recently finished, the author shows an ambitious but arguably satisfiable kid named Pip receive a large sum of money, which he uses to educate himself and fill certain expectations. Remember the Spider-Man discussion. Pip proceeds to somewhat learn to resent his previous life as well as the people in it because they are common, and he feels that he is, by reason of his expectations, in need of being above their vulgarities. But by the end of the book, Pip goes into debt and returns to his old town and unrefined family and accepts them despite, if not for, these attributes. Pip's situation has not changed in the slightest, except he's older and basically going to be playing the role his father played for him to the next kid. But what is important to take away is that he has changed emotionally, and that is his character arc. Our banal Archie now flips this a little. He starts with that poor emotional mentality and then is in the same state by the end of the novel, just in a huge castle surrounded by soldiers. When Pip was satisfiable, Archie was upset, and by the end, when Pip fixes his detestation by returning home, Archie has built a new home and found a new place in his society, but is still exactly the same mentally. This is because when Pip was growing to loathe the commoners in the middle of his story, Archie was growing to love in his, but he's forced to keep progressing, and that progression loses him his love, so he has to return, like Pip did, to his original state. Back to the events in story, Archie and Thord argue in front of a new character, Walder. Walder is the leader of the Illagers, and we learn that the Illagers are mere tribes not yet united under a banner. Now we can infer what Archie, whom we know from the cover of the book showing off his magnificent face, to be the main exceptional character, will do. He will found the Illager Empire. Thord and Archie fight, and because Archie is weak, he is exiled, as Walder favors Thord and realizes one must leave. Thus begins the second character arc, which will lead Archie into having hope, which will then lead him to believing he might actually be able to achieve his dreams. What this means, however, is that he will have will, and now, instead of being something of a reactive force in the story, Archie will become the actor. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Now Archie will be the first action, and the world will be left to only act in accordance to what he has predetermined with his doings, since there will be no other room in which to act. When we read about characters, since they should be like us, and we theoretically do, or if we don't, we generally wish we could or did, we want them and ourselves to be the action. What leads Archie into believing that he can achieve with action what he wants, that is, to be accepted? It is the love and acceptance he finds in the village. After being booted from his tribe, he's left to flee into the home of his people's enemies group, and meets with Yumi, who is a kind villager who takes in the boy on Squid Coast. This is where that middle area is, which I mentioned regarding Dickens' Pip. Archie is able to be happy here, and this could be the end of the story, but it sadly continues, and the only actions available for the making in the face of perfection are ones which will lead away from it. His exile acted as a sort of death of himself, which means that he is now ready to be molded by the mentor character, Yumi, into a new Illager, but the second death is greater because it subverts again what the reader may expect. Most media characters don't deal with two world-shattering events that motivate them out of complacency. Luke Skywalker gets his uncle and aunt's deaths, and more classically, the guy who kind of made the hero's journey so popular, Odysseus, struggles after his world is taken from him and he has to learn to transform himself and his surroundings to overcome them, with his own versions of Yumi throughout as mentors. Still, after however long on Squid Coast, Salar, another villager, grows fed up with the fact Archie is an Illager, and when Carl, the same hero, or ancient builder that first annihilated the Illager party with Thord and Archie, comes to the village, Salar makes a scene and Carl makes a scene, and then it's decided Archie can't stay, being too dangerous around the villagers who will get caught in the crossfire when heroes inevitably, likewise, misunderstand the idea of a good Illager. Now Archie has had a taste of what he has desired, and has an even greater desire for it. With that set up, however, he's ready to somewhat stoop to get what he wants, and he's ready to call anything a friend just to be satisfied. That's what leads him to pick up the Orb of Dominance, which is probably the most intriguing character in this book, especially because I know the Illager should be, but they both become so inseparable that the Orb, through manipulation, has Archie become less of his own person and more of its host. So why are there still so many pages left? After being expelled from Squid Coast, Archie wanders for about 2 days and is hounded by the undead and who not. It's later revealed that the orb, which he finds directly after these wanderings, was quite possibly behind the sending of these zombies and husks. On a lore aside, this would reinforce the idea that the Orb of Dominance has power over the undead, despite that being the Nameless One's thing, as if the former truly were controlling the latter. Self-promotion! Something I'm struggling with is sharing just how the book feels. When I talk about it here, I get the feeling I make it sound sterile, like a mix of one event and then another, plus some boring information about why it's oh so important that you feel as I do. Like a zealous English teacher trying to explain why Romeo and Juliet is about more than just love and is a commentary on vengeful society and vendetta and blah 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 blah. But when one actually sits down to read it, it feels really much more like how I'd describe one's stream of consciousness. That is, it makes total sense within its own context, and the book doesn't mandate that you break down the silly hero's journey and other tropes in order to actually understand why the subversions make sense from a meta standpoint. They just do. Now, without the ability to be loved by Yumi, Archie finds the aforementioned Orb of Dominance, which has him build, or refound, High Block Keep, where he will live for the rest of the book, where he will find his emotional state still the same as it was in the beginning of the story. Hereafter, he begins to gather other Illagers under his banner and takes control of the Illager tribe from Walder as Archie creates what is called, at least by the fanbase, the Illager Empire. Regarding Walder, actually, she is fascinating, though admittedly only because of the nature of the other Minecraft books, which have simpler stories. Walder does not play the singular part of the former leader that kicked Archie out from the tribe, only now to be made irrelevant under the boy whom she wronged, and is instead kept in the novel and given a new role with the same personality, leading to her history, having picked Thord over her new leader, advancing her character simultaneously as her original pride and haughtiness remain despite her lowered position. This state of humiliation does create a juxtaposition in her, and it furthers the resentment she has for Archie, even though I'd argue it doesn't seem like she wants to admit she hates him, since she knows it could be dangerous to even harbour that resentment. Same while, however, it also makes her grow closer to Thord, who has been an underdeveloped bully character. Suddenly, Walder and Thord, who have previously only tolerated each other as rivals, work to complement each other to one day return to the old system of rulership. And the book never says this, but since it's narrated somewhat through Archie's perspective, we do get to know that regardless of if they are both as in cahoots as he thinks, in reality Archie does believe they are, and this sets him further from his initial goal, since even with power, he has no friendship. Now, paranoid, the Orb starts to double down and act more as the Illager's friend. This leads him to further be alienated, and as we slowly start to notice, Archie's actions through the Orb deviate from actions which would help achieve his desires. And from here, there are only two conclusions to be made, where either Archie's changing/losing his desires, either by the Orb's manipulation or not, or Archie does not know that the infrastructure he makes, such as that of the Redstone Mines, are ultimately tools which will actually lose him what he wants, and he just doesn't know it. As with many things in this book, I'd suggest it is a mix of both. Since Archie is losing the feeling for the need of friendship, as he believes the Orb is his friend, he does care less, but he also knows he was happiest in Squid Coast and wants to return to that state. Thus, he creates these places, the Fiery Forge and the Redstone Mines, not, again, caring to foresee how it will actually work to take over the village without losing what he actually wants: Yumi's love. It's this dualism that has Archie struggle to know himself as he is slowly homogenized under the Orb into the Orb. And since Archie represents us, it means the book stops being about us, but we don't know what we are enough to define us. We start to want what the Orb wants, all until Archie finally sees what the Orb is doing, but also sees the role he has to play, and he cannot deviate from that. One of the coolest scenes in the book is the end of Thord's arc with Archie. Obviously, for the entirety of the book, really, Thord's entire purpose was to harangue the diminutive villager and also cause him to feel paranoid with Walder. Thord's end is a good climax to this and does reel the reader back in, making it easier to feel as though Archie still does know what he wants. Basically, after going to raid Squid Coast and miserably failing due to the attack being set off prematurely, through Thord actually, Archie is kidnapped by the Nameless One and is able to make a deal with the undead. This part is not super important to any critical look into the novel, however the lore implications are interesting. After returning to Hyberlock, though, Archie finds Waldo without thought and becomes suspicious, though Waldo doesn't admit knowledge of the bully's whereabouts. Finally, with the orb, Archie realizes that his enemy is in the Fiery Forge, stealing diamonds and whatever else, and he heads out to stop him. The characters meet, and Forebeck actually lets Thor die. I don't think I know any other Minecraft books that let people actually lose their lives like that, much less to the main protagonist's hand, and I have to commend this book for being so daring. Thus, with Thor's character arc being concluded, him being only ever a pain in Archie's side, now no longer alive to play another role, where another role almost certainly would have just felt like a cheap way to keep the then meaningless person alive, Walda, who had become very much his co-conspirator, also has her arc somewhat ended, though she does maintain a living status. With her no longer serving as the Illager's leader, and also not being able to play the part against Archie that she did with Thor, she kind of does become a sycophant, just trying not to get executed as Thor was. She might still want power. Archie knows she would betray him if given the chance, and has come to believe that regarding every member of his empire, but with no means of ever achieving it, she has concluded her arc and is just there to serve Archie and crown him as the Arch-Illager. Waldo was always the better and more fleshed out of the two antagonistic Illagers, so I don't mind her still being alive, even though I might criticize useless characters being left so animated in general. If anything, whenever I read the pages that include her character, I feel like her existence embiggens the Arch-Illager because of the contrast between the two. Now, though, the main point of these chapters here is probably to isolate Archie. Archie has absolutely no one to trust, and, as I said, has come to loathe even the unnamed Illagers who just work as soldiers or whatnot around him. But he does know Yumi is out there, and although he has plans to conquer Squid Coast to fulfill the orb's expectations, and likewise rid the world of the villagers, Salah, who wronged him, he does still want to keep her safe, and still wishes he could just have stayed in that amiable village to the end. In media, characters very often struggle to know what they want, and then also know if they have the will to achieve it. Alternatively, they also can struggle with a dualist nature, which has their desires conflict with each other. Like so, the Arch-Illager feels like he's sunk himself in debt already to form his empire, and he can't just leave it all for Yumi. If you'll forgive another classical reference, this is as Lucifer from Paradise Lost. He, after betraying God, asks himself if that was wise, and while he does suggest the better to reign in hell than serve in heaven line, implying he's proud of his state, he later says that he's unlikely to be forgiven, this while chatting in Pandemonium, and on Earth he does drive home his character and confirms himself, saying, "Farewell, hope, and with hope farewell fear. Farewell remorse, all good to me is lost. Evil, be thou my good." And just as Lucifer submits to what he calls his cause, because he has no other options, yet is trying to convince himself that this is by his own volition, the Arch-Illager must play, as the ending chapter of his book says, his role to a hilt. Neither person chose his path, but they're trying to accept them and make their bests of them. So, with the Illagers and the undead in his army, he marches into Squid Coast and meets face to face with what he has always wanted, love, in the form of Yumi. As they both have longed for the same thing for so long, they realize they are on opposite sides of achieving this thing. So Yumi runs, and the Arch-Illager wins. But despite the village burning, razed to the ground, Archie has lost what he wanted, and has lost a great deal of himself. He ends by taking the orb and accepting that, although it is controlling him, it still gave him power and what he thinks he thought he wanted. But even that was the orb, not him, and we die with Archie. So ends the only tragic Minecraft novel. I know this was a long video, but I wanted to make it for ages, as I said. I hope we get to see the Orb of Dominance play another part in the second Minecraft movie, and I hope that film is about Minecraft dungeons more, since the last one was about legends. I'd love to see it take on an evil arc, personally. For anyone who hasn't managed to discover about what this video would be before posting, that is a shame, as I gave you plenty of clues. Maybe if you just turn up the contrast here on the preceding video's thumbnail, though? There we go. Also, please join my Discord server. I just added a few new emojis and it got its first boost. Very exciting. We chat about all sorts of Minecraft stuff, including lots of lore, so we'd all be happy to get to meet even more people with new ideas. Please always consider to analyze what you read so it can build you up. Always consider evaluating yourself, and no matter what, always remember to keep on luring. I'll see you next time. Bye.